Alrighty. So, first of all, thank you all for coming. We really appreciate you taking out the time to expand and learn about the different opportunities that you have and that we have as Phi Theta Kappa. My name is George Neighbors. I'm the regional officer for Pi Lambda, which is the chapter of Seminole State College. And I'm here with Valeria. She's my co-officer. And we have our guest star, Tracy Harbin. She's going to be discussing career readiness and the competencies that come along with your academic career and any other extracurricular activities you are doing to help you be a better student and or professional.
Thank
So
you for
welcome,
that.
Tracy, of course.
Thank you for that introduction, George and Val. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate the invite. I hope everyone can see the screen that I'm sharing. So I have up, you should see the Phi Theta Kappa. Sorry, I'm Pi Lambda by heart. I know I'm here for PTK overall, but see, it just comes out Pi. It just automatically happens. So as George said, I'm here to talk about career ready skill building. And really the big takeaway is I want students to realize that you are already doing activities that help you develop in these 8 areas that want for you to quote unquote be career ready. So the subtitle, Developing Your Career Ready Skills from Coursework, Co-Curricular Fun, and Beyond. We're not trying to ask you as students to do more and more and more and more and more. You do a lot. The question is how are you leveraging the activities that you're already doing so you could talk about what it means to be career ready. So let's learn. I have some space for us to contribute ideas. I have some boards where I have ideas up there, but just know that by me having ideas up there, that's just starting our conversation. That's not the end of the conversation. So I'm hoping for some high participation from those who are at the live Zoom session. And for those of you that are watching the recorded Zoom session later, hopefully you are generating ideas in your chapter and for your own personal development. So let's go and look at what is career readiness. So this idea that it's a foundation, as I have up on the slide, to demonstrate the requisite core competencies that broadly prepare college-educated individuals for success in the workplace and lifelong career
Like
management.
I'm not getting
Oh
reading
my
this. I
goodness.
was like, I
What
think
is
that's what I
that?
have to do all the
Speak.
time.
Like that's a very long definition of career readiness that comes from NACE. And in that definition, really what it's saying is employers want a skill set that you can confidently talk about when you're interviewing, when you're moving up the career ladder, that you can show that you are a lifelong learner who's growing and developing to become a better. Hopefully you're more than just an employee. You're someone who's invested in the organization. And so you are ready for that investment. So that's what we're talking about. Some people might have said, when I was your age in college, we called these things soft skills. Today, they're a little bit more soft skills imply that maybe they're not important. They're squishy. No, these are important. And that's why we've changed the language from soft skill to these are something that you want to be ready and you want to be able to communicate how you are in fact ready. So, in looking at this employability, the first question that I have, especially because I work in higher education, I'm honors director. I teach political science. I teach our first year experience course. So, I really value having that piece of paper, that college degree. The degree is important because it shows the world that you have a set of credentials, that you've done the work to say, yes, you are ready to study at this level or you're ready to be employable in these areas. So why is that not enough? Well, the reality is so many of us have a piece of paper that it's did you just check the box and do the prerequisite? Now in the age of AI, so many of us are asking, is it the machine that's doing the work or is it the person? And so I think, in this age of we have access to more and more and more and more and more summations of information at our fingertips, I think we really have to be asking ourselves as, people who are on a vocational career path, what do we bring? Who are we and how are we different from that next person who has the piece of paper as well. And so that's why I want students to understand these 8 general areas that employers want to have the competencies in, and we're going to talk about that today. And then I want you to understand PTK students are some of the best and the brightest, and we know you are the achievers. We have tons of data that show you're likely to complete your bachelor's degree, you're likely to do well. Many of you will go on and get a graduate education, but you are people who, like myself, have a hard time saying no. So you're like, yes, I'll do that. Yes, I'll do that. Oh, that's a great opportunity. I want to go and do that. And oftentimes you overextend yourselves. And so the last thing that I want to do today is give you one more thing that's going to further overextend yourself. I want you to look at what you're already doing and how you can use what you already do in your federal work study jobs, in your leadership roles in PTK, in your coursework, in other fun. Hopefully, you're doing some fun co-curricular activities, whether that's your SGA at your campus, your student government, whether that's volunteer hours and activities, whether that's something that you're doing in the community. I want you to look at what am I already doing to gain experience in these areas. And then hopefully this presentation is inspiration for you for how you can talk about that experience in ways that an employer is going to both value and appreciate and say, you know what, we want to bring Val on board, or we want to bring Cheza on board. We want to bring Alex on board. So I'm really hoping that's what you walk away with today. So, exploring the Great Eight, and the NACE is underlined because it's the National Association of College for Colleges and Employers. So, it's a national organization that works together with colleges and universities to say, we're going to talk about what the universities and colleges are doing, but we also want the employers to weigh in and say what's important. So, I feel like it's very important, given that we are in the state of Florida and we very much value diversity of viewpoint in the state of Florida, that when I talk of these great 8, these are coming from NACE directly. So I do want to speak to the last one on the top row, which is equity and inclusion, because, there are some folks who are quick to say, oh, we can't talk about, diversity, equity, and inclusion in Florida. And it's the reality is there's a lot of politics that are happening right now. And what I want people to appreciate is what we do talk about in Florida is diversity of viewpoint. And in order to have many viewpoints in the room, you have to include people who may have viewpoints that are different than yours. So I know we are sitting in Florida. I know this is the Florida region. I know I work for a Florida State College. And I just want to put it out there now and say that equity and inclusion is something that nationally colleges and universities, and more importantly employers, say that they want in their team of employees. So I want to address that so it's not an elephant in the room. And I want to say that I think we are doing a great job when we do talk about diversity of viewpoint. And that is something that we are allowed to do in Florida. And so let me address that now before we get too far into the presentation. Rather than reading off each one of these areas, the way I have this set up is I'm going to go one by one. So we're going to talk about career and self-development, and then I have an ideas board. And then we're going to talk about communication, and then I have an ideas board. During the ideas board, I want to make it very clear that what I have on my PowerPoint is just a starting part of the discussion. It's just my ideas. There are about 18 of us in the room, and so we can definitely learn from all 18 of us in the room, and we can learn from the folks who are watching the recorded version of this. So let me just say that what I have on my slide is not the end of the conversation, it's the beginning. All right. So let's start with career and self-development. I purposely pick my images. So I pick the mirror because we really have to look hard at ourselves. This is continuous learning, understanding our strengths and our weaknesses, exploring opportunities. it's networking. It is a lot. It is a broad, broad, broad category. I can tell you that I am an employer, so I lead a team of people. I hire folks. And when I hire folks, I look for people who want to be part of the team. I look for people who want to be learners, who are self-starters, who aren't afraid to say, I don't know something yet. Yes, I said yet. Those students who are Seminole State students know that in our FYE class, we're always talking about growth mindset and the power of yet. It is okay to not know something yet, because that yet part says, I may not know it right now, but I am willing to learn it. And so that is what moves you from being in a fixed mindset to into that growth mindset. That also starts to put you squarely into the category of an employee who thinks about how can I continuously improve. So if you struggle with this area, I want you to hang on to the power of yet. So I may not know how to use all the ins and outs of the latest, greatest AI tool yet, but I'm willing to learn. I may not know how to do pivot tables in Excel yet, but I'm willing to learn. So it's that willingness to learn that we're really talking about with career and self-development. Now you get my first taste of an idea board here. So self-development, catchphrases like lifelong learner. Now, this can't just be a buzzword because as an employer, I don't want to hire a team member who's just full of buzzwords, but not going to actually have action on their part. So, the lifelong learner, that's looking for that commitment. The fact that the people in this room or the people watching the video are in college and you're thinking about your AA and you're thinking about your bachelor's. And I know some of you are thinking about med school. Some of you are thinking about dentistry school. Some of you are thinking about accountants, teachers, lawyers. These professions all have continuing education units, CEUs. You all in PTK, we're going to talk a lot about the different EDGE programs. Those EDGE programs are your first example of a continuing education unit. It's not something that you're doing because it's a class requirement. It's not something that you're doing because we're paying you to do it. It's something that you're doing because you are truly interested in bettering yourself in, whether it's the research one, the leadership one, the advocacy one. But your PTK Edge is a great example of when an employer asks you, so what are you doing for your career and self-development? And you say, well, I'm a lifelong learner. You could go, yes, you could talk about your degree, but beyond that in PTK, you could talk about the fact that you already know what it means to engage in CEUs, continuing education units. And if you've completed those EDGE certificates, you actually have proof of having done that. So it's the actions. Your actions are going to speak louder than your words. So I can use the word lifelong learner in an interview, but if I can back that up with how my actions show how I value those words, I'm going to be a more desirable, career ready employee. I also, the up here, I don't, well, I do have a pointer here. I have strengths, and usually people think of strengths and weaknesses. I don't want you to think of weaknesses. I want you to think of areas to grow. So if someone says, asks you an interview question of, well, what's one of your weaknesses? You reframe that question in the way you answer it by saying some areas that I hope to gain growth in are. So you're not focusing on the weakness, you're focusing on the area of growth, and you're focusing on what you're going to develop. You haven't had an opportunity yet, but you know that this is where you want to grow. And you think by doing X, you're going to really grow in this area. So mindset, you're going to hear that a lot. Mindset. Think about not so much weaknesses, but think about areas to grow. Think about professional development. So the fact that you're here on a Wednesday afternoon, or for those of you watching the recording, this is an example of professional development. When you take the time to learn, you're engaging in what we call professional development. I know Professor Cornett and I, we have to do this for our jobs. Just because we have degrees to be professors and PTK advisors, it does not mean that we're at the end of our learning. We continue to do this. You too, in your professions and your vocations, you'll do this as well. Now, the career assessments and all of our state colleges have career centers. What our career centers offer might be a little bit different. We at Seminole State have something called Focus to Career. There are all sorts of career readiness assessments. So if I mention Focus to Career, it's a career ready assessment. And that particular assessment actually will give the Pi Lambda students where their greatest strengths and where the areas to grow would be on these eight. If your institution offers focus to career, please take that assessment. Don't wait until you're required to do it in a class. Take it. And whatever career assessment that your career center offers, take it your first semester for those of you who are first semester, first year. But as you learn and grow, take it again towards the middle of your second year. So that way it's a check. Yeah, I'm still on this path. The bottom one that I have here, HR free training as a federal work study. A lot of students are federal work studies. If you're Pell eligible, you're probably also federal work study eligible. If you're not federal work study eligible, but you're a campus employee part-time, as a campus employee, you have access to your HR trainings. And this is, I'm going to confess on the recording, this is a shame on me moment because a lot of my PTK officers are working in my honor center, and I haven't told them the secret yet. But we have something by Percepio called People. It's People Skillsoft is what it is, and it is a learning system that all employees, including federal work study employees and part-time employees who happen to also be students at the college, can go and do project management certificates. Have to some of all of my employees had to do FERPA training, had to do technology training, had to do child welfare training. So it's something that we think about when we're doing those required trainings. But even I forget that there's this whole set of free, that's the key thing, of free workshops that you can do when you're employed on your college campus. The bottom left, asking for and listening to. Like I can ask for feedback, but if I don't listen to that feedback, what's the point of me asking? But, having the conversations about what do you see as my greatest strengths? What's one suggestion that you would have for an area for me to grow in? Your PTK advisors know you fairly well if you're showing up and engaging. And by getting to know those advisors, ask the questions, ask for both the positives and for the areas for you to grow in. You can ask your advisors for PTK, your other club advisors. You could ask your professors. For those of you who are in where you're an employee somewhere, whether that be at the college or elsewhere, when you do your one-on-ones or your annual reviews, listen to what your employer is saying, what sort of feedback that you're getting. And for those of you who are work study, ask for the feedback, even if your employer is not taking the time to give it. Because this is going to tell you where you already have some core competencies and where you might have some areas to grow into. The communication, now I'm going to confess, I spent some time talking with George and Val about this one the other day because communication, a lot of people think it's just how much do I talk, 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 talk. And it's not about how much do you talk or how comfortable are you speaking in front of, say, an audience of 100 or 300 or 1,000. That's not what this is. Communication comes in all forms. So it's clearly and effectively sharing information, it's ideas and perspectives, but it's also listening actively to understand others. So the first part of it about the effectively sharing information, some of that, some of the time it's oral communication, some of the time it's nonverbal communication, some of the time it's going to be written communication. So really parse out and think about the different ways in which we communicate, because I've given you three big ways. And your nonverbals are very, very, very important. I also have been saying, I found myself saying this at work a lot of that. I don't think people listen carefully. I think we listen to respond. We listen thinking about what are we going to say next, but are we listening with our whole self being present? Are we listening? Are we watching for those nonverbals? Are we leaning in? Are we fully present? Like I have my phone sitting here, is this device distracting us from listening in? Are we, for those of us who, are either self-professed ADHD or actually ADHD, I know sometimes we may doodle or write or draw, or we may do something to help focus and concentrate. The world doesn't always understand that we're still focusing and concentrating. So we have to think about what are we doing? What messages are we sending and how we're listening? So keep that in mind. Okay, so what I have for communications, obviously your speech class. I mean, most students have to take, that speech communication class. A lot of us call it SPC 1608. Some schools call it 2608. So whatever you call it, most students must take a speech class to graduate out of their college degree. And that speech class often is the oral communication portion of it. So if you've taken that and you've enjoyed that and you do really well at giving impromptu speeches, talk about that. If you do really well at giving persuasive speeches, talk about that. Because in that course, you are developing a particular skill set. For some of us, the speech class will give us an area to talk about as a strength. For some of us, it'll give us an area to talk about in terms of an area to grow. So you identify whether that's a strength for you already or whether that's an area for you to grow. Toastmasters, when students tell me that when they don't like to give speeches, I tell them to join it's a national organization. A lot of the state colleges have local chapters that meet on their college campus, but look at something like Toastmaster because that's going to give you space to practice giving oral presentations where the stakes are low. Toastmasters is a very respected national organization. So if you're doing that, it kind of speaks highly to your interest in growing in that area of communication. A lot of our clubs have marketing officers, and a marketing officer is a chief communication officer. So I want you to think about your leadership position as being an opportunity to actually showcase what you do. Where I talked to Val in her work study job has to make a lot of flyers for us. I'm not sitting there telling Val what to put on those flyers. She has to figure that out. And she makes it very creatively. She does it where she's grabbing attention. I just had a conversation with one of our PTK marketing officers about the AIDA model, the attention, the interest, the desire, and then the action. And so if you don't know the AIDA model, learn it because that's going to help you with communications. With Val, I don't tell her every last detail that I want on the flyer. She figures that out and she makes excellent flyers. Who would think to talk about flyer making as a form of communication? Because, oh, that's just something Harbin wants me to do. No, that's actually a skill. And whether she knows it or not, I'm going to embarrass her and say she's really good at it. So for those of you who are making your flyers, that's an example of a form of communication. And some of you are very good at it. If you're not good at it, then emulate those who are very good at it. Um, Working as a writing tutor, because again, a lot of our students get hired in our academic success center, tutoring centers, whatever your campus happens to call that place where students go for that curricular support. So if you are a writing tutor, that speaks to the fact that you're a pretty good communicator in the form of writing. And so link that up. LinkedIn. LinkedIn is the first place where you are creating your personal brand. LinkedIn, you are actually communicating your personal brand. That was another workshop that I wanted to give, and I debated spending a whole workshop on how you develop your personal brand. If that's something that you all are interested in, please communicate that, say it in the chat. Yes, I would be happy to attend that, or no, I've already got LinkedIn down. But have folks look at your LinkedIn to see what you're communicating. Let me pause for a second because I don't want this to be the Tracy show. I want this to be an opportunity for people to unmute or to hop in the chat and to tell me, what are you doing already that showcases your strength as a communicator? Or if you're willing to share, but please don't, if you're not in a space today to be vulnerable, I respect that. But if you're willing to share what you're doing to grow in this area, we would love to hear that too. So let's take a minute. If you feel like chatting in the written form, then put it in the chat. But what are you doing to develop your communication skills, or what examples that you have? Um, or if you want to unmute and share.
Hi, Tracy. Can you
Hi.
hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Catherine. Hi.
Perfect. Hi. I know I just sent a message in the chat, but I wanted to hop on mic. I love LinkedIn. Oh my gosh. Love, love, love LinkedIn. It was actually earlier this year when I was invited to attend Catalyst that I'm like, you know what? I'm making some moves. I should put myself out there. And my first thought was LinkedIn. When I connected with some of my business professors, Professor Martina Wagner at Polk State, she put me on Handshake, which is
Love it.
also a really great one for students. I'm sure you're aware of it.
Yep.
I also know of another one called Hunter, which is mostly for like resume and job application hunting, but I love LinkedIn and Handshake so much. So
And I would just say, Catherine, and it sounds like you're already doing this because you're going to your professors, have people review your LinkedIn site. You don't have to be your own editor. Have folks review it and kind of give back to you how they see your personal brand. Do you have photos? Do you have an objective? Do you have areas of interest? Because that all speaks to who you are and what you value. So it sounds like Catherine's already doing that with the shout out to Professor Wagner. Hopefully, those of you who are using LinkedIn are doing it too. Giovanna, you unmuted, so I don't know if you want to hop in to the conversation. Yeah, can we? You're breaking in and out. Okay, we'll see. Hopefully she jumps back in. Anyone else want to be brave and unmute? People in different settings. So thank you for sharing that in terms of the struggle with public speaking and presentations. I tell people to start small, so you don't have to be comfortable in front of 100. Start with 5 friends and practice that way. Practice, practice, practice. That's truly what gives a lot of us confidence. Um, is that if you practice your speech, sometimes you don't want to come across as well rehearsed, but if too rehearsed, you want to be well rehearsed, but you don't want to be too overly rehearsed. So practice is what gives you that. Okay, Giovanna, are you back? I don't know. Everyone, I'm just gonna mute her. Oh, actually, for whatever reason, I can't mute her.
Can I share?
Yes, Val. Yes,
Hi.
absolutely.
So as you said, I do make the flyers for the honors ambassadors and like the any events that are happening in honors. Um, and I mean, I that is my form of communication. To be honest, initially I was a little scared of doing the flyers because it is a big responsibility, because obviously that is people are getting, like, I'm going to be sharing the source of information to people, and obviously any wrong information that is going to be like shared through the flyers that I'm going to be making is going to like be reaching to people. So obviously that like pressure, I guess you could say, was a little scary for me, but obviously I got the hang of it, and it's like really fun and like entertaining how like something so that can be creative and enjoyable for me can be like a way for like to unite people and like, you know, get as much people involved in any way possible. So
And that speaks to teamwork that we're going to talk about in a little bit, and really finding that passion for people and seeing what they show up. But what do they show up to? Which events? It's giving you information as a leader as well. Thank you for sharing that, Val. Ruth, you have a hand up.
I wanted to say that in high school I never like imagined myself standing up in front of people to like give a speech, and whenever we had like presentation and stuff, I would always like try to hide away from stuff like that. But when I got out of high school, my very first job, which is still currently my part-time job right now though, I started working as an English tutor, and I wasn't teaching like native speakers, but I was helping people like non-native speakers in Europe and stuff like that. And I was teaching them, like helping some of them prepare for like some like IELTS exams and stuff. And I want to say that while doing that job, it grew me a lot. I became like bolder. Someone like me on the norms wouldn't even be able to like unmute myself and like say something like this. This kind of meeting. I'm not the kind of person to like speak out normally, but meeting a lot of people and talking with them, although virtually, really like made me improve like a lot. And sometimes when I'm talking to people, they're like, wow, you're so good at communicating and stuff like that. So yeah.
Yeah. That's kudos. Like I'm going to do a quick applause because I'm not quick on my icons, but we really should throw you some celebration icons because that is huge that you're taking the opportunity to practice and just assessing the chat. There are people who say that they struggle to find a low stakes place to practice. For those of you who are doing your fellowship position, one thing that you can do for your club members is host a brown bag lunch. So you don't even have to provide the food. You're asking people to bring their lunch because we all have to eat at some point. Maybe if your chapter has some funds, maybe you can bring a dessert, provide a dessert, but create that space where you have, maybe you have 2 to 5 people give a 5-minute speech and they are cut off at 5 minutes. So that way everyone has a chance to educate someone on a topic. It's also great if people are taking a speech class and you're super nervous to get folks in a room just to practice. Um, I'm gonna butcher the name. I think it's Petrakutra or something like that. It's a Japanese. You've got a short amount of time and you do it with 20 slides. It's a particular form of communication. It's a lot of fun. And George and Val, I'll have to look up the proper name, but it's a lot of fun and it would also be a great general meeting topic where you're encouraging students to kind of stretch and grow into areas where it's fun. So you don't even think about the communication skills that you're developing because you're already having fun doing what you're doing. I'm going to have plenty of opportunity for folks to jump in and speak. So let's go to the next area. And at the end, if we can circle back to any one of the 8 that you want to circle back to. Critical thinking, this is exactly what you think it is. And as PTK students, I know that you do it because I know that you're getting those high marks in your courses, and that's very difficult to do without engaging in some critical thinking. Um, I laugh because I've got fewer ideas on here. But anytime you're engaged in a research project, especially when it's original research, you are engaging in a form of critical thinking. How we accumulate knowledge, even when you're doing literature reviews. So for those of you working on your honors in action, those 8 scholarly articles that you have, that's critical thinking to assess what 8 are we using. Your honors in action is also, it has many different layers of critical thinking. That scholarship development, that literature review is one, but then how you move from what's in the scholarly literature to what action your community needs, that's a form of critical thinking too. And so for my PTK students, all of you on this call, You have great examples of critical thinking. It is a question of how you talk about it in your interview because you want to give just enough so folks go, oh, yes, it's clear that, your group had to discern which eight or the key pieces of literature. How did you summarize that? How did you talk about that area of research? And then how did you go from the head thinking to the doing? And all of that is critical thinking. And you want to tell it in bite-sized pieces where the interviewer or the team who's interviewing you can go, oh, I can see how this person is a critical thinker. How you're approaching problem solving. Are you someone who loves the puzzle and who wants to figure it out? That's a form of critical thinking. If you're struggling with this, we have PTK Research Edge. That's going to give you a skill set for critical thinking. So let me pause here and open up the conversation to you again. What are you already doing that illustrates your critical thinking? Or is this an area that's hard to talk about because it's so heady that you haven't thought about it yet for how you would talk about it in an interview? See, the fact that you're all quiet and no one's unmuting on this one tells me that this is an area that we need to grow in. Not because we're not engaged in critical thinking, because I know we are, but because we don't know how to talk about it yet. So this would be a great follow-up to this as either a chapter meeting or getting your career center people in or having, if your regional officers want to have another career ready workshop specifically around critical thinking, because all of the employers expect us to have it. And yet, if we're not able to talk about it in meaningful ways, then are we really career ready? So let's ponder that, and we can come back to this one at the end because maybe this one just needs some more thought. So I already talked about the equity and inclusion when we kicked off. And so again, just emphasizing that NACE is the National Association of Colleges and Employers. So it's colleges and universities looking around the country, the way at what skills they value in employees and college grads and employees. And I know that we've had big political dialogues about DEI in the state of Florida. But the reality is in Florida, we're talking about it as diversity of viewpoint, and we have definitely in our political um, kind of discussions have talked about needing diversity of viewpoint, and that is a form of inclusion to make sure that all voices are heard and represented. And it doesn't matter what state you're working in, it doesn't matter the industry. You are going to see that awareness, your attitude, your knowledge, your skills to engage with people from all sorts of backgrounds is going to be valuable. I am going to say that as a transplant to Florida, Florida is a very diverse state. And that diversity even comes more in geographical diversity because I meet very few quote unquote native born Floridians. Most of us have moved from somewhere else to Florida. And so that brings up a different way of thinking about education, a different way of thinking about climate. We all think about hurricanes very differently because those people who were born in Florida, who may have had three, four, five generations living in Florida, somehow they're cool as a cucumber when it comes to hurricanes. I've been in Florida now for over 14 years. I'm a little cooler, but I'm not cool like someone whose great 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 grandfather has been, raised in Florida. I'm not that level of cool when it comes to hurricanes. They still scare me. But, you talk tornadoes to me, and I'm like, well, I lived in the Midwest. I know the drill for those. And so that's an example of diversity that we don't even think about. So diversity comes in all forms. So keep that in mind when we're talking about it. And again, as we're talking about it on this call, we are recognizing that it is a value that employers want. So what I have here is, elevating, since we all are sitting in Florida State colleges, what we really need to do is elevate this idea of different points of view. So that diversity of viewpoint again. Also, in what you're doing for your fellowship. So if you're always, I just bought Jenga today because my honor students had an art project where they painted Jenga. If your game night is always the same game, are you being as inclusive with what people want to get together and do for fellowship? I always think about we tend to buy pizza because it's fast and affordable, and it usually covers the vegetarian needs as well as the meat eaters needs. And but it's crazy because when you think about food choices, are you being as inclusive with those? Do we have something for our friends who are gluten free? And vegan friends, because if you're vegan, you're not eating cheese pizza. And so I know it sounds a little bit crazy, but to the extent that you can speak to the type of planning that you do for those of you who are fellowship officers, to think about those different needs, to think about how people are showing up to your events. Also, with the inclusion, we've been talking a lot within the Pi Lambda chapter about showing up. Some years we have really heavy online engagement. Some years we have more face-to-face engagement. Some years we have to figure out what's the right combo of online versus face to face. What's the right day and time? If we're always doing everything Wednesdays at 8:30 in the morning, we might not be getting as many people as if we do the club activity on a Thursday at 3. Something that we are struggling with at Seminole State is we have an activities hour, which is great. We've tried to minimize the number of classes that we have scheduled 12:30 to 1:30 on Monday and Wednesday. The problem now is every club is trying to meet. So Pi Lambda is trying to host a general meeting at 1 on Mondays, but it's competing with SGA and about 30 other clubs for that same meeting time. And so when we're talking about inclusion, we have to think about the fact of, are we offering our event at a time where we can be most inclusive? And that inclusion in this case is simply availability. So we don't have to politicize, equity and inclusion. We just have to think about, are we creating opportunities for people to show up? What you do for your volunteer work, that also speaks to what you value. And are you picking activities that show that you're giving back to a variety of communities? For those of you who engage in study abroad, that also shows that you're comfortable getting outside of your comfort zone. And so that is a huge marker for showing an employer that you are willing to do something that is uncomfortable. And study abroad it's fun. It is loads of fun, but it's a little uncomfortable figuring out what power adapter I need, figuring out what currency, what's the value of each bill or coin. But yet, that's another way to showcase your commitment to operating in a culture that's different than your own. And then your community involvement, those things that you're already doing show that you have a commitment to including others. So I think you guys will have a lot to say on this one, possibly. So let me pause and see what would you add to my slide. And again, you can add in the chat. I am reading the chat, or you can unmute your mic and add here. Or does this topic scare you? Maybe this topic scares you because, we have this culture of, are we allowed to talk about it? And so we are allowed to talk about it. We have to think about the ways in which we are showing up and allowing others to show up with us.
Tracy?
Yeah. Hi, Catherine.
Hi. When it comes to equity and inclusion, I think that was definitely something my chapter especially highlighted when we were trying to get a couple ideas regarding our honors in action project. We definitely discussed a lot of different things, and it definitely wasn't an echo chamber. I hope I'm using that terminology correctly there. A lot of our members had some really great varying viewpoints, and that really showed because we did a lot of different research to kind of like reinforce what we think the best topic and action would be.
And that's a great example of where you had a lot of different viewpoints in the room and you had that, sometimes it's an uncomfortable conversation because you only get to pick one idea. And so it's a
Yes.
question of whose idea rises to the top. But if everyone is listening carefully and working to understand the why and motivation, you can create what we call brave space to have the conversation to say, we've got four, five, six great ideas. um, let's talk about the value added of each one and which ones become doable. Um, but there is something, it ties back to that community. Inclusion and having people feel like they're being heard also ties back to your ability to communicate. Thank you for sharing, Catherine. Anyone
My
else?
pleasure.
Leadership. So because you're on this call, I know that you're leaders already. And this one, I kind of laughed and went, do I have to talk about this one as one of our eight? We do have to talk about it because employers want people who are willing to develop leadership skills. What I want you all to understand, because I know you have them, is dun, 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 leadership is more than titles. Leadership is more than titles. Something that I have noticed with PTK and with honor students, with high achieving folks, is that everyone gets caught up in the title. I have to be president. I have to be president. I have to be president. We can't all be president. Like there's one president. There are in our chapter, we have a total of 8 officers. There are 7 other great positions. And if your president leads with a team mindset, there is space for everyone to be a leader. There's an old adage of lead from where you are. So, the leading comes through how do you empower others? I like to use these when I teach leadership. I like to talk about all these different E's: empowerment, embody, enlist, encourage, envision. How do you do that as a leader? And so, by creating an opportunity for your team to envision, you don't have to necessarily be the president or the director or the vice president. You can do this through your actions. I'm going to say it again. I said it earlier in this call. Actions speak louder than words. So what are you doing? How are you showing up? How are you creating space? How are you leading? Now, if you haven't done the PTK Leadership Development Curriculum or Leadership Development course, I highly, highly recommend it. Having the privilege of being honors director at Seminole State, we have our gateway, our required honors course is the leadership development course, which is built on the PTK curriculum. And that curriculum is built on a servant leadership model, meaning that you are rolling up your sleeves and you're doing the work. As leader, I don't stand up here and look down. I don't wear a superhero's cape and fly in and rescue. As a servant leader, today I didn't wear many sleeves, so that way I can easily push up my sleeves and get to work. And so that is the heart of PTK. So if someone asks you, so what's your approach to leadership? Well, I would hope that every PTK member could say, I really value the servant leadership um, philosophy, this idea that we roll up our sleeves and we do the work. And through our fellowship and through our service, this is how I have had that opportunity in this particular role. Now, to be fair, not all of us may be our preferred leadership style may not glean towards servant leadership. Sometimes I am a servant leader, but I can tell you in my leadership as honors director, I really see my role as a transformative leader. I believe in transformation. Um, That type of leadership is about empowering individuals to grow into their roles. There are other folks who don't believe in transformative leadership. They believe in another model. I will tell you what a lot of companies do not want are the transactional leaderships. So don't be the climber to the top. That's not what folks are looking for right now in this industry. They are looking for people who are critical thinkers, who are communicators, who are team players. So please don't just be the person who glams on to the title of the position. That's going to be more transactional leadership, and that's not. It might serve you in the short term. I promise you, as someone who's in the middle of her career, it's not going to serve you in the long term. So, do employers prefer to invest in applicants who show the potential to develop leadership skills or those who are quote unquote already leaders? Well, let me tell you a secret. Those of us who are already leaders are always developing. There is no such thing as a perfect leader. There is someone who responds to a situation, hopefully responds and not simply reacts, but responds to the situation in this time and place as best they can. I always like the folks who come from kind of mental health counseling, social work. There's an adage, when you know better, you do better. And I believe as leaders, we always have the opportunity to learn. And as we're learning, we know better, we do better. So when we know better, we do better. And so I think that employers would be very shy at someone who said, I'm already a leader. I think that especially when you're young, and I think we're all young until we're about, maybe 85. It's always in how are you growing in your leadership role? A leader never wants to be stagnant because again, that might end up showing that transactional leadership as opposed to the servant leader or the transformational leader. So that's my answer, Catherine, is that I think employers, whether you're developing the skills or whether you quote unquote already have them, if you already have them, I encourage you to shift your mindset and move it to I'm always developing. And we always want to see potential.
I really like that. Thank you. That makes things a little bit easier for me to understand.
Good. Thank you. Anyone else want to jump in on the leadership one? Here we have another question in the chat. How do we know if we are a good leader, and what are some ways that we can demonstrate this to the employer? So the good leader is talk to people and ask. Part of the leadership development course is something that we do in ours is we do something called Johari's window. And we have the students in the class send out a survey to a bunch of different people. So that way you're asking people in different capacities who know you in different ways to comment on your strengths and weaknesses. And then you end up with this Johari windows exercise. You have known to self, known to others, known to others, unknown to you, unknown to others, but known to you. And then your blind self is unknown to yourself and unknown to you. And this Johari's window is a really good exercise for all of us who are developing leaders because it's telling us how we're showing up, how people view us. Now, I don't want to create a bunch of insecure leaders. And what I mean by that is don't we all need validation as human beings. I fully believe that. Whether we're 6, whether we're 19, whether we're 47 or 85, every human being needs to be validated. It is part of the human experience. But don't let your self-worth be determined by others. Seek, that feedback from others. Well, how am I doing in this role? What would you like me to work on? That's a fair question. But listen, are you getting the same message from everyone? If you're getting the same message from everyone, then that should tell you that this might be an area for you to grow in, or it might be an area where you have some really strong core competencies. But you have to be willing to take that feedback, and you have to get the feedback when you're in a frame of mind to be vulnerable because you might not be validated in the ways that you were expecting. And so I don't want you to go and seek this validation during midterms or during finals when emotions are already high and we're already stressed out and we already have 20 things on our plate. That is not a good time to get this critical feedback. You need to get the critical feedback when you can be in a headspace to reflect on the feedback and be accepting of the feedback if it's not, if your unknown self appears more so than your known self does, if that makes sense, to use that Johari window analogy. George, did you want to jump in and add anything else to the question?
No, I think you like pretty much covered it. Maybe a little bit more of like how, so like you talked a little bit more about how we know if we are a good leader or not. How do we voice that like to employers? Like you said, you don't want us to focus on like strengths and weaknesses necessarily. What are some ways that we can be like, in this role, like I did this, or in this role, I did that, which makes me a better leader or a better employee?
So, George, I apologize first if I embarrass you. So I would say that, when the employer, and they always have this question of tell me about yourself. And when employers ask that question, tell me about yourself, this is a great time to talk about how you are a team player, that when you're a leader, you're looking at empowering everyone on your team, but that your phrasing, and this is where I apologize if I embarrass you, but thank you for being vulnerable and giving how you respond with the I do this, I do that. There's a fine balance for the I versus the we. And I think that sometimes we need to say I because we need to use the I to say, yes, I did do this by doing one, two, and three. But when you are talking about your leadership style, if you are a collaborative leader who believes in team building, I don't want to hear the I statement as much as I hear the we statement. So, so let's say your preferred leadership style is collaborative and you are telling your employer a story about how you value leadership and you really want to collaborate with your team and empower them. But then your next phrases are, I did this, I did that, I did this. That's not showing that leadership style. So, in the language that you choose, like if you say that you're a collaborative leader, I would expect to hear the pronoun we. If you say that you're a servant leader, I might hear I along with my team or I along with the other volunteers because it's not, when I hear a lot of I's, I worry that you might be the heroic leader, the person who swoops in. You do nothing until the 11th hour when the problem is there, swoops in, saves the day, and then swoop back out. And then you leave everyone else to like figure out the rest of it, right? And so sometimes that pronoun use I might be indicative of the heroic leader, or it might be indicative of the transactional. What can I get out of this? So one piece of advice by using your question to help illustrate it is that you want to think about what pronouns are you using? Are you showing yourself as a team player? We did this and I'm going to give credit to my team. Or are you focused on the I? Now, the caveat to this is that sometimes my personal opinion is that students who aren't confident and students who have been disempowered in situations are sometimes afraid to use the I. So the I pronoun is really, you do have to have a sense of confidence, and I would like to see those who maybe struggle in the area of confidence get comfortable and get confident at saying, well, I did do this with my team. So this bit of advice about pronouns really comes in. I need to work one-on-one with students sometimes to say, are you at a spot in your journey where we need to confidence build? And so I want to use the I with you, and I want you to say, I did do this because you are building confidence. Or are we at a point in your journey where you need to show how you as the leader empowered your team, so you're choosing your language carefully in the we. So if again, I'm sorry to put you on the spot like that, but that question was such a great question to illustrate how we can use language in the interview to communicate those leadership values. So are we an I as a leader or are we a we? But that being said, I don't want you to never say I, because sometimes I is a way to show confidence, and we do want confidence in our employees.
Okay.
Does
Thank
that,
you.
yeah,
Yes,
thank you.
ma'am. I appreciate it.
Okay, let me keep moving on so we don't run out of time. And again, if some of these conversations resonate with you and you want more, put it in the chat so that way your regional officer team know what to plan for future workshops. Um, the professionalism. So demonstrating strong work habits, integrity, accountability, dependability, and a high level of dedication and doing a good job. We all want to be professionals. Um, that professionalism comes in how we dress, how we appear, how we, I want people to look at their LinkedIn. Like, what does your headshot look like on LinkedIn? Is it a selfie that you just took, or is it a professional headshot? If your career center or your college offers free headshots, go get one because that is your first foray into showing the world your level of professionalism. I also want you to think about what is on your social media, what's public and what's private. Nothing is ever truly private when it comes to social media because anyone can take a screenshot of what I've posted and repost that screenshot. So there is no such thing as a private channel. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about that professionalism. But I have some questions for you to reflect on. So, how do you show up? So, at the start of this session, I made sure that I got in 10 minutes early. I was working on my screens, but the background, I happened to be delivering this from my house, and I'm in my home office, which doubles as a guest bedroom. And so I told everyone prior to the recording is do as I say, not as I do because how I showed up, I didn't have my background. I didn't have the lovely Seminole State campus behind me when I first showed up. I'm going to use myself as an example. It would have been better to log into Zoom on this computer and have that background ready so that way people didn't see what professional setting I was in. A lot of students show up on Zoom calls on in their bedrooms with, so they're sitting like this on their beds and they're not thinking about what they're wearing. They're not thinking what the people on the Zoom call is seeing. They're not thinking about the fact that their camera is pointed up to the ceiling fan. They're not thinking about that. Some of the benefits of having been a student in the pandemic is that you're very comfortable with Zoom. Some of the downfalls of doing so much on this type of technology from home is we got too comfortable with it. And so we're not thinking about what are our backgrounds? What are we wearing? What are our filters? Who's walking behind us in the room? I'm at home with my daughter, but she knows that when I'm on a Zoom call, and I'll tell you right now, I have my professional voice on. I have my presenting voice. George and Val will tell you, I don't speak with this cadence every day in the center. And so Olivia knows that when I'm speaking in teacher voice, that she needs to not come in and interrupt me, right? It's part of that professionalism. I wish young people would think about that as well. So, how are you showing up virtually online, as well as how are you showing up to your events? What are people saying about your events? Are they well organized? Are they put together last minute? Do you show up to your event, 15 minutes late? What are people saying not only about your event, but about the planning and execution of the event? My honors ambassadors met. They meet once a month, I think. I don't usually go to their meetings, but I get a huge report of everything that they're planning. They are awesome. They are rock stars. Any one of those individuals sitting on that team can talk about the role of the team meeting, can talk about the planning, can talk about the fact that we have X amount of money to spend. These are the resources that we're doing. These are the events that we're thinking about. We're thinking about the inclusion of food in this way. We're thinking about the inclusion of art activities in this way. Um, so I know, like for me, if any one of my honors ambassadors asks me for a recommendation, because I know of all the planning of their events, they are great planners. I have seen teams where, with the execution of their events, not for this group, but for other student clubs, that they have a plan, they have a flyer, but it's like you show up and there's no one there. And it's like, and even them, the planners. And it's like, okay, we got to talk about professionalism because that's a great, easy win for you in terms of professionalism. That if you talk about hosting 10 events and planning it out X number of weeks in advance with a clear plan of action for who's doing what and when and how you're checking in and how you check back in with your members after the event is done, all great examples of that professionalism. Also, this last question of how are you building your brand? Your brand is both your club brand as well as your brand as an individual. So just like I suggested on for Catherine, like the professor is reviewing her LinkedIn, how are you occurring to people? Are you calm, cool, collective? Do you show up early? You know, my daughter is in a piano, she does piano and voice lessons, and on the wall it says, if you to show up early is to show up on time. To show up on time is to show up late. So to show up early is to show up on time. To show up on time is to show up late. So if we show up to the piano lesson at, 4:45, that's on time, which technically means we're late because she's not in the room ready to go at 4:45. And so she misses a minute of her of lessons. And so the culture of that music school is you're going to show up 5, 10, 15 minutes early. So when you guys are scheduling, when your team is scheduling an event, if the event starts at 2, you schedule in your calendars to show up at 1:45. So that way you're ready to roll at 2. That's part of building your brand. That's part of building who you are in terms of being reliable. This teamwork, this is again, you guys work in teams all the time. We promote it in PTK. We require it. Our regional officer team is just that. It's a team. And so what I did was looking at the definition of teamwork. What I want, we building collaborative relationships, working effectively towards common goals, respecting diverse viewpoints, and managing conflict. Again, if you can take that PTK leadership development class, I know Polk offers it. It's an SLS class. Seminole State offers it. A handful of state colleges offer it as a 3-credit course. If you can do that, please do that. If you can't do that, take the Leadership Edge course to get some of the teamwork building course. But the way I want you to think about teamwork is overlapping circles. So, teamwork, you need to have strong communication. You need to make sure that you're including all of your team members. You need to engage in critical thinking as a team because that's why you're having so many people in the room. Now, I have a master's in international relations, so I'm constantly thinking about Irving Janis's group think because that was famous. He wrote about the Cuban Missile Crisis and the dangers of engaging in groupthink. It's something that we study in diplomacy. As a leader, you don't want a bunch of people in the room who just say, yeah, your idea is great. Yes, President, your idea is great. As a PTK president, if that's what your team is telling you, I would want you to revisit how you're running your team. Because what you want is that critical thinking, and you need that critical thinking through the ability to communicate, the ability to have everyone show up, the ability for everyone to exercise professionalism. So just like Catherine shared with us, her team had competing ideas for their HIA project. At the end of the day, they could only pick one. And at the end of the day, even though there might have been 3 or 4 team members whose idea was not picked, they still need to enlist and encourage those team members to get on board with the idea that was picked. That's going to take a bit of professionalism and a bit of leadership on everyone's part. So when we're talking about teamwork, which is one of the 8 competencies, I want you to see teamwork as kind of the grand poobah, if you will, of all of the earlier core competencies. So that's why I put everyone on here except for career development and self-development, because that's something you're doing on your own. That's some reflection. And I don't have technology on here yet, because technology is going to be our last one, and that's going to be another whole conversation. But let me pause and see if you all have questions about how do you talk about teamwork? How do you think about it as really building upon all of these skills together to empower your team? Or are we good? Okay. I'm going to take that as a we're good for now, but we do have Q&A and discussion coming. Technology. The technology, I don't have a board after this one for discussion and ideas because every day we are talking about how are we utilizing technology. Right now, our conversations are all around AI. My boss today in one of our team meetings that I had, he attended a webinar where the speaker was from H&R Block and they were talking about the ways in which they want their candidates and their employees to use AI. And it wasn't just you're not going into Copilot and treating it like a Google search. The power of AI is bigger than this. And there are a lot of different tools. And George and Val and the other regional officers, I really think that we need to just have a whole workshop on technology and especially technology and AI for how can you become a savvy user of AI? When is it ethically used? So they don't, what my boss was sharing with us in our meeting today is that they don't want employees who just go into Copilot and say, give me a summary of give me a summary of NACE's 8 core career competencies. And then boom, you spit that out and regurgitate that on your PowerPoint presentation. That's not what they want. Did I ask Copilot about NACE? Yes, I absolutely did. I'm going to confess that I did. Did I ask Copilot to create this presentation for me? No, I did not. And I hope you all can see that because what I did was I said, okay, I want to present NACE's 8, but then I needed to use my human brain and my experience with PTK because I know you, even though I may not personally have met each and every one of you, I know the hallmarks that you carry with you in order to be eligible to be a PTK member. So I had a pretty good barometer check on who I was speaking with tonight because I have been a part of PTK for well over a decade now. So I think 13 years actually, if I remember correctly. So I just want to say to you that the technology is a tool, but it does not replace the human part of this. So that's why I think we need a fuller workshop. And you do need to start using these AI tools. Please don't be afraid of them, but you also need to start reading the ethics around AI. So it's not just a use and abuse. It's not a use like a search engine, but it's actually going, how can this help us learn a lot of information and then think about how we're going to employ that information with our own capacities, with our own critical thinking skills. So that brings us to the end. I still have 2 more slides at the end, but that brings us to the big overall discussion and Q&A for us. We're doing well on time. We still have 9 minutes, so we have plenty of time. So I am happy to open up the floor for discussion. I'm happy to take questions and answer them for you. I'm happy to backtrack to other slides. Um, just for the sake of time, um, I do have next steps for you. So I want to make sure that as a chapter, you're thinking about workshop ideas. You're thinking about how are you building your team and you're doing team building exercises because those exercises are going to give people talking points in interviews. I also want you to think about how you're collaborating because that's going to touch upon a lot of these 8. As an individual, I want you to think about the PTK Edge programs, doing those and using them as professional development so you can keep learning. It's going to help you be a lifelong learner, but it's also going to give you something to talk about. On your state college campus, I want you as an individual to go visit that career center because they know these 8. They're not going to be any different from what I just told you, I promise. But they're going to have things like big interview. They're going to have things like career assessments, like focus to career. So you can do a deeper personal dive and then talk to the career coaches at your campus. I also want you to talk to professors and mentors. So that way you can learn yourself and do a little bit of that self-discovery. Um, Many of you, you may not realize it, but as leaders, you are already mentors. I know that on Seminole State's campus, we have mentors for our FYE class. We have mentors for first gen. I'm trying to get mentors set up in the honors program. But whether you carry the title of mentor, because you carry the title of club officer, you are a mentor to many. And so, as a mentor, listen to others, listen to what they need, validate them, and then encourage them to explore in areas to grow. So that way, more people can have confidence in these career ready skills. So, and then my last slide, and I will come back to this one, is my contact information. So if you want to scan the QR code, you can go get to my LinkedIn account and we can connect on LinkedIn. And I have a ton of PTK students on my LinkedIn account. I like that because as we meet each other, we can give each other endorsements. You know, if you liked my speaking abilities, you know, you can give me an endorsement. If I see you present at one of our regional conferences, I am happy. You may have to ask me, hey, Harbin, give me an endorsement, please. We build those endorsements. And when employers are looking at our LinkedIn, if we have endorsements that, you know, I'm going to verify those endorsements. So if you have a bunch of your friends endorsing you, but what I like about LinkedIn is we can see who's endorsing whom. And so we can game the system, we can try, but truthfully, you're not like if I'm an employer, I'm looking at who's giving that individual those endorsements. So let me go back to the Q&A slide, maybe now, or discussion to see where do you guys want to go in our next 6 minutes? And I will say I'm human, so I like a little validation. If you loved the workshop, say you loved it. If you've got room, if you have suggestions for improvement, I'm happy to get those. You can put those in the chat. You can email those to George and Val if you want to give that in a more confidential way. But I am happy to I'm happy to get validated and I'm happy to be told where I have areas to grow because the only way we're going to grow is to know.
This was a great workshop, Tracy.
Thank you. See, look, I smiled and I set up later. I went from this to like, thank you. Like, see, we all need that. So I'm even giving you guys examples of how nonverbal communication communicates a lot. And I just want to say I appreciate everyone being brave and asking questions. And thank you, George. I know I didn't really give you a choice in that discussion about the I versus the we, but thank you for being a great team player and allowing me to go down that rabbit hole.
Of course, anytime.
It sounds like LinkedIn is a topic that folks would love to chat about. That's coming up in the in the chat. And also, I'm not seeing a lot of discussion questions because I think a lot of people are processing all the insights. And that would be a piece of advice that I do give to you is that, you know, if you jotted down a few notes, to go back and look at the notes in a day or two and ask yourself, what's my action plan from these notes? Because I know a lot of times I take a ton of notes and then if I don't have an action plan of what am I going to do with them, they may sit in my pile. And then when I clean off my desk 4 months later, uh, I go, wait, oh yeah, that was great. I should do something with that. If you've noticed, I can't turn the teacher off in me. So I gave you an action plan in case you didn't develop one yourself. So this slide here for next steps is my suggested action plan for you. But please customize that to what you need.
I have a question for you.
Yes.
So being that a lot of us are student leaders, what we often are like, we have a lot going on. So, what are some ways that we can encourage ourselves and others to either step into these roles, or are there any other tips that you can give us that will help like increase collaboration within a team?
So I said to someone, you need to remind me to check myself before I wreck myself.
Okay.
Because sometimes we have a propensity to say yes, 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 and we're not looking at are we balancing our schedule. And sometimes we're so busy saying yes that we don't think about, well, how could I give this opportunity to you or to another team member or to create space for others to lead. And in my opinion, and it's just my opinion, but I think some of the leaders whom I respect the most knew how to create space for others to lead. So, how to empower others. So, I would encourage you, George, and your team to empower others. I had a discussion with one of your PTK officers actually about how do you ignite that spark in your team? So if you're trying to build a new team and you want to move that momentum, a lot of times PTK teams look to the last year's team to go, are we doing as well as they did? I'm like, why are you looking in the rearview mirror? That team is done and gone. You in the front, look in the not in the mirror, but look in the windshield, look through the windshield, look what's in front of you. Don't look at what's behind you. And so I actually did have this conversation with one of your team members about, as a fellowship officer, when you are, or service officer, now I can't remember if it's fellowship or service, but when you are looking for events, find out what's passionate, what passions do people have. So with this particular individual, I was talking about your HIA project. And, it very well connects to her mother's background. And as soon as she talked about her mom, she lit up really big. And I said, right there is your example. Like, I noticed a nonverbal communication about a passion that you had. I can see, and I'm sorry, everyone, I'm not sharing Pi Lambda's HIA project. That is not mine to share. So that's why I'm being careful in my words. But this particular officer has a very personal connection, lit up. And I said, that's what you have to figure out as club officers. Like when your members are leaning in, when their eyes are getting big, I mean, you can see it was such a good conversation that right now my hands are open and I got, it was really a transformative conversation. And I said, go find the passion that other people have and create events that get people as excited as what you're excited about that HIA. And that's how you start a movement. And in my opinion, that's how good leaders lead. I always talk about all of these E's, the empowerment, the enlistment, the embody, the envision, the enable your team to actually, your other people to actually lead. Because guess what, everyone? You are going to graduate. We are gonna do everything we can to get you to graduate in 2 years. We may let you stay 2.5, but ideally you graduate here in 2 years and then you move on to your undergraduate university and you graduate there in 2 more years. And so you have to prepare the people behind you to look through that windshield. That's the word I couldn't think of. The windshield. You want to look out of your windshield, not out of your rearview mirror, because there's a whole lot more in front of you than behind you. And so the good leaders will think about what legacy are they leaving, but that legacy needs to be an empowered group of individuals to run. And yes, they may do things better than you did them, and that's okay because there's no need to compare because your leadership is done in this role. And so if I could get young people to see that, don't be threatened by the powers that rise up behind you. And for the current leaders to not be plagued by the ghost of leaders past to make it your own, we would really be developing great leaders, in my opinion. And I'm sorry I jumped on that soapbox. Anthony, that was a bit of a soapbox.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
That is quite all right.
So I think as advisors, we all struggle with we know what our students are capable of, but we can't do the work for you. And so it's giving you enough tools so you realize your own power. And that is such a great, I think that's a great point to leave the conversation on, is that we know that you all have superpowers. It is about working together as a team to elevate each other so those superpowers can be shown to the world.
I completely agree.
Thank
All right, I think it's time to wrap up this awesome workshop. I feel like everyone got something out of it as I was looking at the chat. Anything else anyone wants to ask Tracy? Or any doubts that were not answered? All right. Well, thank you, Tracy, so much for being our speaker of today's workshop. It was a pleasure and a privilege to have you here and giving so much advice to all of us here, PTK students. Um, yeah, thank you.
thank you for the opportunity.
All right, I think we're gonna wrap up, and thank you all of you guys for joining us today. And hopefully, this was helpful for your guys' career readiness experience. And more future workshops will come and to answer any other questions for your journey.
Great job, everyone. Bye.
Thank